The word overpowered is used very, very often in World of Warships Legends, but most of the time it doesn't apply to battleships. They talk about overpowered destroyers, overpowered cruisers, and overpowered carriers. But battleships are left out of the overpowered conversation except for one. That is the Tier 7 premium Soviet battleship, the Lenin. Now, this ship is an old one. Came out in 2020 for the Christmas event. In 2020, 2021 for the been many that have come by, such as the Lion and the Yoshino, but this one stays legendary for one big reason: the armor. Now, with the Nelson layout, you really only need to worry about what your bow armor is when you're playing the Lenin. You're never going to really worry about what's behind you. So the bow armor is brimming with 32 millimeters almost everywhere. I mean, looking at the bow of the ship, the bow and stern, it is coated in 32, and the only real 25 is right there, and no one is hitting that. The ship is very strong with the armor, and because of the way it is designed with the 3 guns in the front, it really can be a threat. So, the Lenin, a brawling, bruising battleship. How do I set it up? Well, I go with aiming systems mod. I always do that with most battleships. Secondary could be an ability. Main battery mod 2 is definitely somewhat in the ballpark. Definitely wouldn't recommend AA. We'll talk about later with a big weakness of the Lenin with that, but it's definitely not the mod on this list that I would definitely avoid. Second slot, I would go with steering gears. Yes, you could go with the fire because of the way the Russian battleships are with their limited DCPs. That's the very safe option to kind of try and help out the weakness. But the big thing with the Lenin is with steering gears, it really can allow that third turret to become much more accessible because you can peek it out and peek it back in. Now, I run concealment because concealment is king in this game, and having the extra concealment on this ship is very important because usually with a Lenin, you want to get in. With a Lenin, if you need to get out, you need to get out quickly. You're being overwhelmed, so concealment can help you get out in that situation. And I go for main battery mod 3. Same rules apply with the AA gun, so that's out of the question. Secondary battery, you could, but this is such a valuable mod slot that you have to go for the reload because of the traverse speed helping out as well. My commander build, it's a debate between Lev Galler and Mikhail Kedrov. I run Kedrov. Should I run Kedrov? That is up for debate, but because he is 16-4, I've stuck with him through thick and thin. I run not the one for nuisance. Putting Brawler on this ship just makes it too one-sided. It becomes too much of a bruiser. You can't play it at range very well. And it also starts to kind of creep too close to the outer limits of where a Russian battleship starts to become good. So I don't run it. I run the fire build. I kind of try to run a little bit of survivability build. I run crisscross for the traverse speed. I always think the traverse speed, and with Kedrov running the show on the Lenin, it can be a very, very, very potent traversal speed at that point. I run volunteer. Something about the Russian battleships, if you're running them, you should do collective labor until you can get to mastery 3, and then volunteer is the better bet. You get that extra damage control, which gets you up to 5, which in many, many battles, you won't be able to even get 5 damage control parties off in a game. I run Master Mechanic. Reaching out just doesn't really work for this, and Properly Meticulous is one that, again, if you're running a secondary build, you can, but I wouldn't recommend it. It gets it kind of into the realm against German battleships, and when you compare it to German battleships, even when it's souped up on secondaries and a German battleship is souped up for sniping, the Lenin has no regard. Now, the legendary mod is very, very important. You can run all 3 of these are something that you can definitely run on the Lenin. But I would not recommend Will to Rebuild for solo players. Will to Rebuild is for division mates when you can communicate that you need somebody to come give you Will to Rebuild. It's something that can't happen all the time by yourself. It's not a problem. It's not because people aren't that good. It's just that it's hard to communicate that in game. And if you're in voice chat, it makes it a lot easier. So if you're running this in a mainly in a division or in a fleet battle, will to rebuild is probably the way to go. Running with scissors is definitely the way to go. Is definitely the kind of odd option, but I run it because it's just the power when you get close. It helps you eliminate your targets much better. And with the range that I have on Kedrov, 8 kilometers isn't really even brawling distance anymore. So I can get an increased damage at 8 kilometers. That's very far. Fight fire with fire, you can go for if you want to go a full fire build. I wouldn't recommend it because it kind of defeats the, running the ship. If you run, like, for example, because a true fire resistance build would run firefighter, which brings the fires down to 3. So fight fire with fire would need 3 concurrent fires, which means your whole ship would need to be on fire for it to activate. So I personally wouldn't. I would just running with scissors, as if you're running solo. It's just the better thing. It relies on you more yourself. It relies on your skill rather than the skill of other players. So if we go into the stats for the Lenin, you can see survivability, 63,000 based on my build with 63,200 health. That is very good. The 96 artillery stat, it really shows it here. 28 second reload. You could get that down with Brawler, but I really do think that 20 second 180 turn time is valuable. It allows you to peek out that third turret and get it back into safety very quickly. The HE shells, not very used on this. You really would only use it if you're facing another bow tanking battleship if you had to. AP damage, very, very good for 16-inch shells. Secondary armament, not the best, but you could pump it up. It's something that you could run if you've got, let's say, you're leveling the Vladivostok, and you want to run the Lenin with more of a fun build. Secondary Lenin could definitely be a lot of fun. I even get some close quarters expert kills with the builds I run by myself. Now this is where the Lenin's weakness starts to show. It may be overpowered, but it still has a weakness. And that is the anti-aircraft defense. It is not very good. It doesn't have much range. It is definitely a blind spot for this ship. If you get in with an aircraft carrier, it can be a long day. If the carrier knows what you're doing, it won't let you be able to do what the Lenin does, which is get stuck into a position and make the enemy either move him or sink him. Maneuverability, not the biggest strength of this ship either, but compared to other battleships, it can be all right. Rudder shift's not great. The turning circle is okay. The speed isn't great, but it can definitely be a bit better than some other ships, so it can move around pretty well. Concealment is a bit of another Achilles heel for the Lenin, but when you running this against other big bruising battleships like a Bismarck or a Tirpitz, the concealment starts to matter less when you're going to be in a position that's going to get you spotted consistently. And the best range of around 10, 11 kilometers on a Lenin really isn't going to go away no matter how much you spec into concealment. So it is a bad side of the Lenin, but then again, the way you play it, it's kind of not needed. Alrighty, so we're going to get ourselves into a game here. We're going to spawn ourselves in. You can see the build I was running. I run, the inspirations are Shelley Beepley and Derevel. I always run Derevel, personally, because I feel like reload is the most important thing in this game. They really haven't found, Wargaming hasn't really found a replacement for displacement sort of thing. And just more volume of shells has always been more dangerous than accuracy. Because of the way the dispersion values are and the ellipses, it's always much more dangerous to just fire shells faster. So we spawned in on Greece. We are the bottom tier. We are bottom tier. It is a tier 8 game. So what I think in my Lenin I'm going to do is go into Bravo here and try and kind of not be the front line, Not be the guy pushing in by himself, but just be the guy that can kind of anchor the team. It's because of the way the guns are at the front. If you can get the whole enemy in front of you, you really don't need to move. The best situation for a Lenin is when you can use a island to cover one broadside, and the way to cover the other broadside is just positioning. Like, for example, if I'm going to go to this island right here that I am wiggling over, which is where I'm going to go, that other broadside that isn't blocked by an island is only accessible to my teammates for basically the entire game. So that means if I can keep myself from showing the other broadside, I can really keep the heavy damage from falling on the Lenin. Now, granted, like every battleship in this game, any high DPM cruisers that can spam HE, especially high DPM heavy cruisers with all the 32 millimeters on the bow, can be a very dangerous proposition for the Lenin. Those are one of those ships that even the overpowered Lenin should avoid, is high DPM cruisers. So looking at the enemy team as we go into position here, we see that they've got 2 Tier 8 destroyers, a Tier 8 cruiser, and a Tier 8 battleship. In terms of the cruisers, they've got a radar. And so it's a little bit, I want to be a bit cautious. I'm going to take this shot on this Brandenburg as I get into position. But, it's very much the ships that can kill the Lenin. There's not many ships that can kind of kill the Lenin. Most of the ships that can get after the Lenin can really wreck up the Lenin. But any ships that can not really affect the Lenin don't really affect it regardless. So you see that Azuma out there. We're gonna let that fire burn. We've got 4 heals and 5 DCPs. And the way with the heals and the DCPs, you can almost have like a 5-minute DCP. The heals take a long time. You have to time those a lot better. But the DCP, especially early, if you can kind of do a double DCP heal combo, you're not going to lose a lot. So you see this Brandenburg's trying to push. So I'm going to call the Heathen over for some help. Now this is the biggest problem with the Lenin, is because it's a battleship, it can't do much against a hard push. We're going to put out the dispersion plane and try and hit that Awami. It's a little outside the butter zone for the Lenin, but you can still get some good shots. And see here with the Lenin, you can turn and still have 2/3 of your firepower in front of you. And because of the turning this ship has, it can make it really hard for torpedoing ships to get close, to get into good positions. Because a lot of times for ships to torpedo like this Brandenburg right here, he's going to have to expose himself, and by the time he does, I'm going to be able to pelt him with all 9 of my shells. You see there's the Ostergotland behind him. I'm going to keep backing up. I don't think I have really anybody looking at my broadside very much. You see, so here comes the Brandenburg starting to pull out to drop the torpedoes. You see the Z-23 with those great torpedoes hits. Still going to get hit by some, but I can get that 3rd turret out. Gonna get that flood. Torpedoes out. You can see that Ostergotland is spotted, so I'm gonna shoot him. You see the Lenin, is it really overpowered? It's, if you can keep it in a position where it's a lot safer against the enemy, it can definitely be a threat. But in a game like this, where I didn't have much support in the middle, it's really hard to do it. Once you get somebody, as you can see, it can be very, very tough to kill. Let's see if we're going to get a finish on the Ostergotland. We've been sunk. So, as you can see, the Lenin is overpowered. I believe it's still a good ship in most regards. I really think of it as this game's version. If you play World of Tanks PC, you've heard of this name. It's known as the Object 279 Early, or the 279E. As we watch the Tulsa try to fight from behind the rock. It's very powerful, it's very broken, but if you can get your team to get after it, it loses all its vernacular, it loses all of its power. And so it really is a ship, as you saw right there, that if you can get a couple of your mates to go after, it's not very dangerous. But because of that, it can be a very, very, very dangerous ship. I feel like it's very much along the lines of like a Friesland as we switch over to the Z-44 for a bit. Like a Friesland. Its weakness really, AA is a weakness, but that's very common for battleships. Torpedoes are a weakness, but that's very common for battleships. So those are kind of taken out of the equation. The biggest weakness of the Lenin is smart players. And that's why I think it's still on the overpowered spectrum. You get the right matchmaking with the right amount of players who don't know how to kill a Lenin, which can be very likely because they're very rare. They came out a long time ago, and wargaming likely is never going to bring it back. Anybody who doesn't know how to kill a Lenin is very easy prey for a Lenin. If you don't know to, as you saw, you either rush it or run from it. Don't sit and try and kind of run it down. Especially if you're in front of it, the Lenin's going to work you over. Because these are live games, I couldn't give you the best example, but I've had many games where the ship you can just keep pushing because people don't really know how to play it. People don't know how to push against it properly. And it really is a dangerous ship. I mean, yes, you saw that I couldn't do very much damage very quickly there, and that I was rushed by 2 torpedo ships and the Brandenburg with the Azuma getting support. But I really do think that the ship is very, very dangerous. If you can do what I did there and just make sure that you're in a safe position in terms of, being rushed or being out DPM'd, however that can be. Whether that's avoiding the DPM people, whether that's staying back, but just pushing in can be very, very dangerous if played correctly in a Lenin. And even on the defense, I've had many games where I can defend against the team because they stay in front of me. You want to almost keep that third turret as an emergency turret. If they're getting into a position where you're going to fire that, where you have to fire that turret to save yourself, it's already been in a dangerous situation for the Lenin, unless you're trying to go for the kill. The 6 shells from the 2 turrets got them to a weakened state, and the third can finish them off. But just aggression can be the Lenin's best friend. Aggression can be Lenin's best friend, but you have to be careful with how aggressive you are. So we only did 20,000 damage, but we did finish 4th on the team, which is really good considering we really didn't get many shells off. But as I finish the video here, is the Lenin overpowered? I don't say it would. I wouldn't say it is. I would say, though, it's very high on the list of broken ships. It takes for lack of a better phrase, the World of Tanks hold down method of getting in a position, settling yourself in, waiting for the enemy to come, and making them dig you out. It's very broken in that regard. If you don't have a ship that you can do that with, the Lenin would be the perfect ship for that. Because the guns are at the front, because the armor's at the front, because everything is focused in front. It's almost as if it's semi-traversable turret from World of Tanks. You can't see anything in front of you is what you should be looking at. And if you can keep everything in front of you, it's a lot better ship. So, unfortunately, because of the way the channel is with live gameplay, I couldn't really show you guys the best game. But that's what happens with live gameplay. That is what I'm bringing, though. Live gameplay to show you guys that I am human and people around me are human. So thank you guys for watching so much on this first video of the brand new Hippers Don't Lie channel. Thank you. If you guys could do me a favor and like and subscribe this video and comment down below. I might be able, if these videos start getting popular, I might be taking ship requests to do for these live videos. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.